Today I'm out here in sunny Southern California taking a look at probably the most exciting car that I've driven in 2017, the all-new 2018 Kia Stinger. I realize I've driven a wide variety of vehicles this year, including a McLaren, but the Stinger is most interesting to me because this is an affordable performance car. This is right about the same price as a top-end trim of a Camry or an Accord starting, and it tops out in the same neighborhood as an Acura TLX. So this is the kind of rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive performance car that a lot of people can afford. If you hear a lot of tire squealing in this video, that's because I am filming this car right on an autocross course that they've set up for us to drive the Stinger back-to-back with a wide variety of surprising competition, including a Porsche Panamera, a BMW 4 Series, and of course a few Audi models. The German competition, the German looks, and of course the German handling ability of the Stinger is not accidental, because Kia dug deep and hired a wide variety of engineers from German luxury brands to help them design this vehicle. The Stinger is, of course, the close relative of the Genesis G70, but the G70 is actually a little bit smaller than the Stinger because it is more of a compact luxury sedan, and this is attempting to be somewhere between a mainstream rear-wheel drive sporty vehicle and something like an A5 Sportback or perhaps an A7 Sportback. Before we go much further, we should talk about competition because that's pretty difficult to define for the Stinger. You could see this as an alternative to an Audi A5 Sportback or perhaps a BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe, but it's also a logical alternative to a Chevy SS or a Dodge Charger. It also ends up being a good alternative to top-end models of the Camry and Accord because this starts at $31,900 and comes standard with a wide variety of features that you find in those top-end front-wheel drive mainstream sedans. Because the Stinger is longer than something like a 4 Series Gran Coupe or an Audi A5, we also find rear seat accommodations that are a little bit more similar to your average American mid-sized family sedan. But of course, this is smaller than something like a Dodge Charger, and it doesn't have a large rear-wheel drive American driving dynamic. This actually feels more like a BMW 3 Series or a Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Base models of the Stinger get halogen projector headlamps, but every other trim gets these full LED headlamp modules with LED turn signals, LED daytime running lamp strips, and of course LED high beams and LED low beams. A few other things change up front as you move from one model on to the other. The grille, for instance, is a little bit different in the 3.3-liter twin-turbo version than the 2-liter turbo version. We get blacked out chrome, we get a more three-dimensional grille as well. Because we're driving the top-end model, we have a radar sensor right here behind this center section, and of course we still have the tiger nose grille that we've seen in other Kia models. As you look around the Stinger, most of the vents are functional. These are actually functional side vents. These help improve aerodynamics. They also help aid brake cooling. Then we get some functional ducts behind the front tires, but the hood vents are actually just styling. The Stinger is available in 5 different trims with 2 different engines, but they're all exactly the same length, 190.2 inches long. That makes this about 5 inches longer than an Audi A5 Sportback, but about 6 inches shorter than an Audi A7 Sportback. This is also about 5 inches shorter than a Chevy SS, although we have very similar interior room because of the overall design of the vehicle. The length of the Stinger is obviously a big differentiator between this and the upcoming Genesis G70, but the other big change is that this is a liftback, and that's why I'm comparing this to the A5 Sportback and the A7 Sportback. Instead of a traditional trunk, the glass and what looks like a trunk lid open as one piece. Whether you want to call this particular design a hatchback, a sportback, or a liftback, it's definitely more practical than a trunk because there is no rear seat pass-through. The rear seats just fold down, and it's one enormous slot all the way from the front of the vehicle to the back of the vehicle. It's a little hard to see during the day, but out back we have full LED tail lamp modules with a light strip that runs right there in each module. I have the turn signal lamps on the other side so you can see what that looks like. Although there are a few visual changes out back from the base model on up to the top end trims, most of this looks exactly the same whether you get the 3-liter model or the 2-liter model, which is kind of a surprise. We don't find the full LED tail lamp modules in the base model, however. Although we still find well-integrated parking sensors and quad exhaust tips, surprisingly enough. We also have a well-integrated spoiler that's actually part of the liftback itself. Under the hood, we find 2 different engines. Things start out with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 255 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, and then we get this engine, a 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6 producing 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. This engine is new to Kia, but you have seen it in America before under the hood of the Genesis G80 Sport. Both engines are mated to a standard 8-speed automatic transmission, which is pretty common in the near luxury and luxury segment these days. But unlike the near luxury segment, the Stinger sends its power to the rear wheels by default, not the front wheels like the Lexus ES or the Acura TLX. If you want added traction, you can add all-wheel drive to either engine for $2,200. Fuel economy comes in about 2 to 4 miles per gallon lower than most of the luxury entries. That's something that we've come to expect out of Kia lately. If you get the V6 engine that we're driving right here with the optional all-wheel drive system, you'll end up at 21 miles per gallon combined. If you get the 2-liter rear-wheel drive model, you should get about 25 miles per gallon combined. 2 different driver's seats are offered in the Stinger. There's a base 12-way seat with a 4-way adjustable lumbar support, and then the optional 16-way seat that we're driving right here. That adds inflatable side bolsters and an extending thigh cushion. It's worth noting that the passenger seat in the Stinger is always a few steps behind the driver's seat, so even in this top-end trim, we don't get the inflatable side bolsters or the extending thigh cushion. When it comes to overall seat comfort comparisons, I found these seats to be more comfortable than something like the Dodge Charger or Chevy SS or the Acura TLX, which is definitely in the same price range as the Stinger. These seats are also more adjustable than the seats that we find in the TLX or the Lexus ES or the Lexus GS. These are not quite as comfortable as some of the top-end seats that we find in the Mercedes-Benz C-Class or the BMW 4 Series, but these are very, very close. Now, one thing that you do find in the European competition that we don't see in the Stinger is a passenger seat with the same range of motion as the driver's seat. So in this model, which is the top-end trim, we don't get the extending thigh cushion or the inflatable bolsters over here for the passenger. I get asked frequently, why aren't there more mainstream rear-wheel drive vehicles? Well, one of the reasons is overall space efficiency. This vehicle is about 190 inches long, but we have a little bit less interior room than certain other vehicles that are this same length. That just has to do with the overall placement of the engine under the hood. Because this vehicle has to have a relatively long hood compared to something like a Honda Accord or a Toyota Camry, we get a little bit less room in the vehicle compared to the overall length of the vehicle. That said, however, the rear seats in the Stinger are surprisingly comfortable. This front seat is comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I have about 4 inches of legroom left. I was also able to fit very comfortably over here on the passenger side, put that seat a little further back, more suitable for a 6'4" person, and I am still able to fit over here on this side of the vehicle, as you can see right like that. Now I have about 2 to 3 inches of legroom left. In terms of overall headroom, the Stinger does come in below something like a Toyota Camry. If I were to sit very upright in this back seat, my head does definitely touch the ceiling, so I would have to slouch just a little bit in order to really use the headrest. However, headroom is actually quite similar to something like a Ford Fusion. One of the big selling points for the Audi A7 or the Audi A5 Sportback over their sedan counterparts is cargo capacity and cargo practicality, but the Stinger actually manages to beat most of the luxury entries here. With 23.3 cubic feet of storage space right here behind the liftback, or 40.9 if you were to fold the rear seats and stuff your cargo all the way in the vehicle up to the front seats, this has cargo area very similar to the average compact crossover. The Stinger will swallow about 8 cubic feet more cargo than a Kia Optima, which is a pretty significant amount, and about 2 cubic feet more than an A5 Sportback. Under the load floor, we find a little bit of storage space, and we actually find an honest-to-goodness compact spare tire, which is getting pretty rare in the European luxury sedan category. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in the top-end trim, so we do have the optional moonroof above the front row seats. I will also shoot some footage of the base 2-liter trim, so you can see what that looks like inside as well. Up front, we have height-adjustable seat belts for the driver and the front passenger, and 2-way adjustable headrests. Leather is standard inside the Stinger, as are heated front seats. Our model has the optional ventilated front seats, and of course the inflatable side bolsters for the driver's seat only. As we see in many compact luxury vehicles, the front doors are a combination of hard and soft touch plastics. The lower portion of the door right here around the bottle holder, that's a hard plastic right there. We have a little bit of hard plastic right here at the bottom of the armrest, but we have soft touch injection molded plastics at the top of the door, and then stitched pleather right there for the center section that's in that sort of ivory or tan color. The overall dashboard design is reminiscent of some Mercedes models. We have 3 large air vents in the center. This knob rotates in order to close and open the vent. We then have a standard infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now, the model we're looking at right here is the up-level and slightly larger screen that also includes factory navigation. The upper portions of the dashboard are all soft touch. We have a soft touch pleather section right here, and then a soft touch injection molded upper section that has been after stitched to give it the appearance of multiple pieces of material. Below the pleather section of the dashboard, we have metallic effect trim and then a large bin-style glove compartment. I was able to fit a large tablet computer inside. Below the air vents, we have the controls for the UVO infotainment system. We have a few direct access buttons over here, track forward, backward. You'll find the map database on an SD card right under that cover right there. and then we have a favorites button over there on the passenger side. Below that, we have the controls for the front 2 climate control zones. The rear climate zone is sort of a partial automatic zone. There's a knob in the back that allows you to adjust the air temperature coming out of the rear vent between hot and cold. It's not directly tied with what's going on up front, although it is of course related. Below those climate controls, we have a roller cover covering a 12-volt power port, a USB charge-only port, a USB input port, and of course an auxiliary port. This storage cubby is not quite large enough to fit some of the larger modern smartphones. The trim in the center of the dashboard and the doors is real brushed aluminum trim. Moving out from there, we have 2 large cup holders, and then we have a joystick style shifter. We put our foot on the brake and we push this shift button over here on the left side. We pull back for drive, you'll see that lights up. Toggle forward for neutral, forward again for reverse. Park is a button right over here. We then have an electric parking brake, a auto brake hold button, the drive mode selector. This allows us to choose between custom, sport, comfort, eco, and smart. This controls the way the engine, transmission, and optionally the adaptive suspension behaves. We then have a traction control disable button over there, the controls for the heated and ventilated seats, parking sensor enable disable, auto start stop enable disable, and of course the heated and ventilated seat for the passenger. Between the front seats, we have a leather-wrapped center armrest. This opens to reveal a moderately sized storage cubby, which is pretty average for a rear-wheel drive vehicle, because of course the drive shaft is right under there. But you can see you can very easily put large smartphones inside. The Stinger gets a unique key for the Kia brand. This is not related to any of Kia's other Kias that I have seen. The lock button is right here. It's sort of a round button up top, and then we get unlock, trunk button, and then of course a panic button as well. The instrument cluster is quite similar to other Kia models. We have black faces, white numbers, and red needles. We also have a large color multifunction display between the speedometer and the tachometer. Inside this multifunction display, we have a few screens that we haven't seen in other Kia models before. We of course get our typical trip computer information, navigation turn-by-turn directions, the status of our vehicle safety systems, and of course certain vehicle settings, including adjusting the head-up display, but we also get a lap timer, a G-force meter, and some additional gauges that we don't see in other Kia models. All Stinger models get standard paddle shifters down on the left and up on the right, but not all models get the flat bottom steering wheel that we're seeing right here. This has aggressive sport grips on either side and a perforated section as well. On the left side of the steering wheel, we find the controls for the infotainment system, dedicated phone buttons, a mute button, voice command button, etc. And then on the right, we have the controls for the optional radar adaptive cruise control system. This toggle and the button above it control the multifunction display between the speedometer and the tachometer. Let's talk performance figures first. 0 to 60 happens in 4.7 seconds if you get the 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6 engine. Now, we were unable to compare the twin-turbo V6 all-wheel drive back-to-back with the twin-turbo V6 rear-wheel drive in our 0 to 60 scoring, but the all-wheel drive version definitely did it in 4.7 seconds. Now, the all-wheel drive is going to be a little bit heavier than the rear-wheel drive version, but it is going to give you improved traction. So if you want to do that 4.7 time repeatedly, it's probably going to be the option for you. If you get the 2-liter turbocharged engine, then you run 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds. That is actually quite similar to the base 2-liter turbo engines we find in the competition. Oddly enough, it really is not that much slower than the considerably more powerful Ford Fusion Sport, which does it in 5.3. Audi's A5 Fastback is going to be a little faster 0 to 60, but it uses a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. Dual-clutch transmissions do have added maintenance costs you need to keep in mind. Overall, this is quite comparable to the Cadillac CTS V Sport, which is logical because this is about the same size as the Cadillac CTS, and it is really not that much slower than the GSF. A Lexus GSF will do 0 to 60 in 4.5. I'm going to go ahead and pop the braking score up there at the top of your screen so you can see what that is, but braking in general seems to be pretty average for the mid-size luxury sedan segment. Keep in mind that although this is priced like a compact luxury sedan, something like an A3 or even a BMW 320i, it is actually sized more like a Lexus GS or a BMW 5 Series or perhaps a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. That is very, very important to keep in mind because this is larger and heavier than a 320i, larger and heavier than a C300 or a Lexus IS. Although the size and weight is not that noticeable in the acceleration time, it is noticeable when it comes to handling. This feels a little bit more like the A7 or the BMW 6 Series Gran Coupe than the 4 Series Gran Coupe or the A5 Fastback. Kia compensates for that by putting fairly grippy summer tires on the GT models, and that really does improve the overall grip of the vehicle. We have 225 width tires up front, 255 width tires in the back. We had the opportunity to test drive this vehicle back-to-back with some of the luxury competition, and the tire choice really is one of the big differentiators between this and the other vehicles. I think that the overall rear suspension design is perhaps a little bit more elegant in something like the Infiniti Q50 or the 440i Gran Coupe, but because this has grippier tires on it, it actually held the course that we were driving on just a little bit better. One of the important things to remember with the Stinger is that Kia decided to tune this more for a GT or Gran Turismo style ride. The classic Gran Turismo is a car that is very comfortable to drive out on the open highway for long car trips, but has excellent acceleration, excellent braking figures, and very good handling, but not necessarily class-leading handling. So if you're going to compare this to something like the luxury sedans in this category, the 4 Series, the Audi A5, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, etc., then keep in mind that certain versions of the competition are going to outhandle this, but generally speaking, they're going to be sacrificing the ride quality for that extra handling ability. And even when we're in the sport mode in the Stinger, this delivers a very comfortable ride, so I'm definitely going to give the ride score an A+ for this segment. This ride is a little bit firmer than some of the American sedans, so this is going to be firmer than something like a Chrysler 300 or a Dodge Charger, but the difference is actually quite small, much smaller than the difference between, for instance, a Dodge Charger and your average 4 Series. Thanks to the laminated windows that we find in all models of the Stinger, the interior is very quiet, and that surprised me a little bit. If you're after something that is quieter than your average family sedan, definitely give the Stinger a good long look. This easily fits into the luxury segment when it comes to interior cabin noise. Fuel economy is obviously the letdown for the Stinger if you're looking at this versus some of those high-efficiency luxury entries. That's been something that we've come to expect from Kia for a while outside of their hybrid models, and it likely has something to do with the engine choices and the overall weight of the vehicle. The 3.3-liter twin-turbo engine is relatively heavy, and that is noticeable in the curb weight of the model that we're driving, which is right around 4,000 pounds. Just for reference, a full-size Jaguar XJ sedan is going to be right about the same kind of curb weight that we see in this Stinger. Now let's talk about the nitty-gritty. The 2018 Stinger will start at $31,900. That buys you the 2-liter turbocharged engine, rear-wheel drive, and actually a surprising amount of standard equipment. I've posted a list of all the standard feature content in the base model Stinger on your screen so you can see what that looks like, because it is a surprising amount of feature content. All Stinger models come standard with leather upholstery. We also get standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, dual zone climate control, front and rear parking sensors, and quad exhaust tips. Those are all things that you don't really find on the competition, whether we're talking about luxury competitors or mainstream competitors. If you want the 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6, which I've spent most of my time in today, then that will set you back $39,000 starting. About $51,000 if you want everything inside your Stinger and you want the all-wheel drive option. You could save about $2,000 if you just want the rear-wheel drive model. Kia's new Stinger is the kind of vehicle that's difficult to compare for a variety of reasons. The first is, of course, that the price tag spans several different categories. Starting at just under $32,000, you could see this as a logical upgrade from something like a Camry or an Accord. The price range of the Stinger is also very similar to near luxury front-wheel drive based or front-wheel drive biased vehicles, like an Acura TLX, perhaps a Volvo S60, and of course the Buick Regal. Compared to those options, the Stinger yet again does very well because of the overall size of the Stinger, the fact that this has a near perfect 50-50 weight balance, and of course it is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Then of course we have the luxury branded competition like the Audi A5 Sportback or the BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe. The Kia Stinger is going to be significantly less expensive than those options, but performance is going to be shockingly similar. The Audi A5 Sportback is very quick for a base model in that particular segment. However, this is only 0.2 of a second slower 0 to 60, and it uses a traditional 8-speed automatic transmission, meaning its maintenance costs are going to be lower than that Audi A5. When it comes to the 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6 model that we've been driving right here, it actually manages to be faster 0 to 60 than a number of its direct competition in the luxury segment. Handling ability in the Stinger is absolutely excellent, although it does fall behind some of the competition very slightly when it comes to feel out on the road. And of course, Kia had a slightly different mission with the Stinger. They decided to make this more of a GT or Gran Turismo kind of vehicle, and so they've given it a slightly softer suspension. And that softer suspension means that the rear end of the vehicle can tend to get a little bit lively out on your favorite winding mountain road. Now, if you get the all-wheel drive version of the Stinger, it does help calm that down a little bit, but this is still going to be a little bit more tail-happy and a little bit more push-outy, if that's really a word, than something like a BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe. However, it is definitely more dynamic than the Audi A5 or S5 Sportback because we have a lot less weight up front. This has a near perfect 50-50 weight balance, and of course if you get an Audi A5 or an S5, then the entire engine is actually in front of the front axle. And in the Kia Stinger, very much like we see in the BMWs, they push the engine as far back in the body as possible. If you're thinking about buying an American rear-wheel drive performance sedan like a Chevy SS or perhaps a Dodge Charger with the V8, then you should give the Stinger a look if you want something that's a little bit more nimble, a little bit more European, but priced right around the same. At $39,000 for the 3.3-liter twin-turbo base model, it compares quite well to the 5.7-liter V8 that we find in the Dodge Charger. This actually ends up being faster 0 to 60. In addition to being faster 0 to 60, the Kia is just more dynamic out on the road as well. It's just more fun to drive. There are a wide variety of vehicles in America with a similar price range to the Kia Stinger, but at the moment this is definitely my favorite, and I would buy this over any of the vehicles that we have mentioned so far in this video. I would also buy this probably over the Infiniti Q50 Red Sport. I like the Stinger for the same reasons that I like the Q50 Red Sport, but this actually delivers a slightly more premium experience. My bottom line with the 2018 Stinger is that this is definitely my favorite vehicle that I have driven in the 2017 calendar year. It's practical, it's a hoot and a half to drive, and it is very, very well priced. In fact, the Stinger has impressed me so much during my time with this car down here in Southern California that I think I might buy one. I think I'll get a gray one with the 3.3-liter twin-turbo engine and probably all-wheel drive because it's a little bit more practical than the fun rear-wheel drive model. So if you see a video in 2018 about me buying a new car, don't be surprised if it's a 2018 Stinger.